Imagine waking up tomorrow to find out you've inherited this staggering debt. Like, not a financial one from your parents, but an actual spiritual, historical debt spanning thousands of years of human existence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the kicker, you are being told that you are personally responsible for paying it off, starting right now.
I mean, it completely upends the way we usually think about inheritance, right? We're comfortable talking about inheriting, eye color or real estate or maybe some quirky family
Remember
traditions.
the easy stuff?
Exactly. But inheriting the unresolved grief, the conflicts, and the historical resentment of literally every generation that came before you, that's an entirely different level of psychological burden.
It really is. And that deep, almost crushing sense of inherited responsibility is the focal point of the source material we are pulling apart in today's deep dive. We're looking at an excerpt from a really emotionally charged 1956 religious text.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
It's titled Breaking the Walls of Resentment and Inheriting Heavenly Victory. Specifically, we're looking at Prayer 3, which was delivered by Reverend Sun Myung Moon on December 23rd, 1956. And our mission today isn't just to, read this text, but to dissect its underlying machinery.
Right, the metaphorical architecture of it.
Exactly. We want to understand how it uses vivid imagery to take a reader from a state of paralyzing guilt to a state of militant, unstoppable action.
But before we unpack those mechanisms, we definitely need to lay down a clear framework for how we're handling this material.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And I want to be crystal clear with you listening. In exploring this document today, we are operating strictly as literary and theological guides.
Just looking at the text itself.
Yes, we are not endorsing, validating, or taking sides on the religious viewpoints or the historical claims presented here. Our goal is simply to look objectively at the concepts and the striking imagery contained within this 1956 prayer, just to understand the specific worldview and the psychological journey it constructs for its followers.
And that psychological journey is actually the key to the whole text. If you look at the overarching structure, this prayer is, it's really a masterclass in rhetorical engineering.
How so?
Well, it doesn't start by demanding heroic action. It starts by systematically breaking the reader down, forcing them to confront an insurmountable historical barrier before eventually weaponizing that exact feeling of helplessness into a militant drive.
It weaponizes it.
Yeah, and it begins this process with a very stark spatial metaphor. The claim that for thousands of years our ancestors have been building up walls of sorrows.
Walls of sorrows. The choice of the word wall is so specific there.
It's very intentional.
Right. It's not a river you can swim across or a storm you can wade out. It's a wall. It completely blocks your path. It blocks your vision. And the text goes further, stating that as time passes, these walls aren't eroding away.
Right, they're getting worse.
Yeah, it says that through many deceptions, Satan is actively making these walls higher. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because when I read this, my mind instantly went to the concept of compound interest on a multi-generational financial debt.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Like, you didn't max out the credit cards, you didn't enjoy whatever was bought, but you are born holding the bill, and the interest is compounding daily. By framing history as a growing wall, the text forces the reader to view the past not as a closed book, but as an active, compounding threat.
What's fascinating here is that transforming history from a passive timeline into a physical blockade, it completely changes the believer's relationship with time.
Yeah.
I mean, history is usually something you read about in a textbook, right? It happened, it's over.
Sure.
But a wall demands a physical, present tense response. If there is a literal wall in front of you, you only have a few options. You can turn around, you can stand still, or you can tear it down.
And the text removes those first two options.
Exactly. It explicitly states that today, all the people of the world have a direct responsibility to take down these walls of resentment built by their ancestors.
It completely traps the reader. It says, we too must understand that we have that responsibility as well. There are no innocent bystanders in this theology. You can't just walk around the barrier.
No, you have to go through it.
But tearing down a structural wall of that magnitude is exhausting, heavy work. If the text establishes this unpayable, compounding ancestral debt, how does it expect the believer to survive that psychological crushing?
Well, the answer it provides is actually super counterintuitive.
Right.
It doesn't offer them a break. It asks them to lean heavily into the anguish. The narrative introduces a critical reinterpretation of what historical suffering actually means for the follower today.
Okay.
It shifts from looking back at the ancestors' wall to looking directly at the figure of Jesus. The prayer reflects on the traditional understanding that Jesus walked a path of anguish, but then it deliberately collapses the distance between that historical event and the present-day reader.
Wait, I have to push back here. Because usually, traditional narratives of historical spiritual sacrifices treat those events as finished, closed loops.
Right, the debt was paid.
Exactly. The sacrifice was made so that the followers wouldn't have to suffer. But this text argues the exact opposite.
It really does.
It says, we thought that Jesus himself, having gone the path of anguish, was just his own anguish. But when we realize that his anguish remains as ours, we discover ourselves to be those who must now go towards heaven with tears flowing. I mean, why would anyone willingly sign up for a theology that promises ongoing anguish instead of relief?
That's a fair question.
Demanding the believers walk around with tears flowing sounds like a recipe for immediate emotional burnout.
Well, it sounds like burnout if we view religion purely as a search for comfort.
Yeah, I guess so.
But sociologically speaking, shared struggle creates much stronger group cohesion than shared comfort ever could.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. If a past spiritual sacrifice is viewed as a completed transaction, the follower's primary role is just passive gratitude. You say thank you and move on with your life.
You're just an observer, basically.
Exactly. But this text intentionally removes that passive safety net. By stating the anguish remains as ours, the follower is drafted as an active, real-time participant in that original suffering. They are carrying the exact same emotional and spiritual load.
It's requiring emotional vulnerability as a toll for entry.
Yeah.
Like tears flowing isn't a metaphor for just feeling kind of sad.
No, it's very literal.
You can't just intellectually agree to take down the wall. You have to physically manifest the heartbreak of entire human history while you do it.
And those tears are a required mechanism for ongoing empathy. It forces a state of continuous, deep connection to the cause. You're asked to look at the walls of all the sins your ancestors committed, and the text dictates you must look at them with our hearts breaking over those sins.
That sounds devastating.
It uses that emotional devastation as the starting point for action. Think about it. When you force a group of people to share a profound, emotionally exhausting vulnerability, they bind together tightly. They're no longer isolated individuals.
They become a collective.
Exactly, a collective carrying a shared monumental weight.
Devastating really is the baseline here, though, because the text openly admits the psychological toll this takes. It says that when you look at these massive walls of historical sin and your heart breaks, the immediate realization is how weak we are.
Yeah.
And I actually appreciate the rhetorical honesty there. It's not just pumping the reader up with hollow motivational slogans.
Right, no toxic positivity here.
Exactly. It's saying, this wall is thousands of years old, it's terrifyingly high, and standing in front of it makes you realize you are incredibly frail.
Acknowledging that frailty is a vital step in the psychological engineering of the prayer. If the text simply commanded the follower to tear down a multi-millennial wall, the natural human response would be rejection.
Like, no way, I can't do that.
Exactly. The task is too big. By voicing the follower's internal feeling of weakness first, the speaker validates their hesitation. The speaker pleads with the Father to let them inherit the strength to push all this away, creating a bridge between the feeling of total inadequacy and the expectation of monumental effort.
And that bridge leads to a very specific vision of what lies beyond the wall. The prayer asks to reclaim the wall of tears and to realize a garden of harmony.
A garden, yeah.
Yeah, even if the believers currently find themselves in a lonely position, the ultimate goal is the manifestation of this garden, which is also referred to later as the Garden of Desire. Here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the underlying logic of the theology, based on the specific choice of the word garden.
Rather than like a city of gold or a heavenly fortress.
Exactly. Think about what it actually takes to make a garden. If you've ever tried to clear a patch of overgrown wilderness, you know it is intense, back-breaking labor.
Oh, absolutely.
You are pulling up deep roots, your hands are bleeding, you're fighting the soil and the weather. In human history, gardens represent cultivated peace. A garden isn't a magical, instantly appearing utopia that just drops from the sky.
Right, it doesn't just happen.
It's the result of relentless, daily human effort to impose harmony on chaos. The metaphor perfectly mirrors the text's demand for unending hard work.
Cultivation is the perfect lens for this. A garden requires constant maintenance, just as tearing down a wall requires active demolition. The text refuses to promise a magic fix. where the divine just descends and solves the problem for humanity.
There's no easy way out.
No. It acknowledges human hesitation, it validates the weakness, but it insists that action is required anyway. It states that because God is concerned about us in your heart, believers must leave our hesitations behind and appear as those who are going forward without rest.
Going forward without rest. There's that relentless pace again. The comfort isn't that the work will be easy. The comfort is simply that God is emotionally invested in them. Which, in this framework, is supposed to be enough fuel to just keep pushing through the blistered hands and the flowing tears. And understanding that grueling, continuous labor sets up the most drastic pivot in the entire text.
Yeah, the tone shift here is massive.
Up until now, the tone has been heavy. We've had heartbreak, tears flowing, feelings of weakness, lonely positions. But then, the prayer abruptly drops the sorrowful weeping and adopts a militant, unyielding battle cry.
It invokes a direct command from Jesus, quote, "Leave everything and follow me." And from that precise moment, the language becomes incredibly driven and absolute. It asks that followers become good sons and daughters of heaven who can run hard along the path, determined to go, quote, "whether we live or die."
Whether we live or die. I mean, it forces a binary state.
Completely.
There is no middle ground, no part-time participation allowed. You are either fully consumed by this mission or you are outside of it.
And this shift to absolute commitment brings us to the actual scope of the mission being assigned. The text outlines the stakes with a very specific, immense time frame. It says, "Since we have the responsibility that we must fight with Satan and be responsible for the 6,000 years of historical resentment."
Okay, let's pause on that number. 6,000 years. That isn't just a random large number thrown out for dramatic effect, right?
No, not at all. It is the traditional biblical timeline. In many fundamentalist and historical theological frameworks, tracing the genealogies from Adam and Eve forward yields a human history of roughly 6,000 years.
Okay.
So by using that specific number, the text isn't just saying a really long time. It is saying the entirety of human existence. It is placing the weight of every single mistake, every resentment, and every sorrow since the literal dawn of humanity squarely onto the present moment.
So what does this all mean? We really need to look at the sheer scale of that demand.
Yeah.
If you tell someone they are personally responsible for resolving the entirety of human history and they need to fight Satan to do it, how does that not paralyze them? I mean, my brain short circuits at just dealing with my own unread emails from last week, let alone 6 millennia of global ancestral sin.
It's a lot, but it avoids paralysis because of the rhetorical structure we've been tracking. If we connect this to the bigger picture, if the text started on line 1 by saying, "You must resolve 6,000 years of history," the reader would just shut down.
Oh, absolutely.
But it didn't start there. It started with shared sorrow. It validated the reader's feelings of weakness. It created a deeply emotional bond through the shared tears of Jesus.
Right.
It broke the reader down completely in front of this metaphorical wall. It emptied the cup of their individual ego entirely.
Emptied the cup so it could be filled with something else.
Exactly. Once the follower accepts their profound weakness and their deep emotional connection to the suffering, the text fills that void with a militant, empowering call. The climax of the prayer asks that followers become courageous men of victory who can fight with good hearts, with indomitable spirits which have made new determinations, new decisions, and new pledges.
Indomitable spirits.
Yeah.
That literally implies a spirit that is impossible to subdue or defeat.
Unbreakable.
So you start the prayer weeping at the foot of a terrifying wall, feeling incredibly weak. And by the end of the prayer, you're an indomitable warrior running hard toward a garden of harmony, ready to live or die for the cause.
It's quite the pivot.
The psychological engineering there is brilliant. It takes the crushing weight of history and weaponizes it into an unstoppable forward momentum.
And it achieves this momentum by entirely reframing the burden. The resentment of 6,000 years is no longer just a tragedy to be mourned. It is an active structural failure that the believer has the power to fix. History isn't just a shadow you're standing in anymore. The text turns it into a crumbling dam, and the believer is suddenly handed a bucket and told to stop the flood. The follower is transformed from a helpless victim of history into the ultimate protagonist of history.
They become the hero.
Yes, they are the ones who can make all preparations without hesitation and be embraced and loved by heaven. It elevates the everyday choices of the believer to a level of cosmic importance. Every action they take is either building the wall higher or tearing it down.
It makes the mundane feel absolutely epic.
It really does.
And this brings us to the core takeaway of what we've unpacked today. This short, intensive text from 1956 takes us on a profound journey of perspective. It forces the reader to confront the literal walls built by those who came before us. It challenges them to embrace a path of shared anguish, to push through feelings of deep human weakness, and ultimately to aggressively cultivate a garden of harmony with an indomitable spirit.
And, while this text is deeply rooted in its specific theology, the underlying architecture of its message resonates far beyond it. Even entirely outside of a religious context, we all live in the shadows of walls built by our predecessors.
That's so true.
In our families, in our societal structures, and in our institutions, we all face the lingering, compounding effects of historical resentment. The text forces a very uncomfortable reflection for anyone reading it. Are you passively letting those walls grow higher, or are you actively taking on the exhausting, tear-filled work of dismantling them?
It's a heavy question that completely shifts how you view your own agency in the world.
Mm.
And it leaves us with one final unexplored thread to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
The text insists that true followers must make all preparations without hesitation to achieve this massive 6,000-year historical correction. But I want you, the listener, to think about that level of pressure.
It's immense.
If you truly believe, to the core of your being, that the fate of 6 millennia of human sorrow rests squarely on your everyday actions, your new decisions, and your new pledges, is that level of absolute, unyielding responsibility the ultimate key to unlocking human greatness and an indomitable spirit.
Or is carrying the weight of 6,000 years of history a guaranteed recipe for inevitable, crushing burnout?
Yeah, it's the ultimate tension between finding profound cosmic purpose and just buckling under unbearable human pressure.
Definitely something to think about the next time you feel the weight of history, or even just your family's history resting on your shoulders. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We loved unpacking the hidden architecture of these ideas with you, and we'll catch you next time. Keep asking the big questions.